Is Poco back to its flagship roots with the new F5 Pro? A 64-megapixel camera with optical image stabilization, fast wired and wireless charging, and 2022's best high-end processor make it sound like it is. How about the rest? Let's inspect. Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, nice to meet you. I'm Michael, and in here we inspect a lot of cool and interesting tech. And let's see what we've got here. Smartphone with a 64-megapixel camera with optical image stabilization, the ability to charge wirelessly with up to 30 watts in terms of speeds. We have a high-end display, a high-end system on a chip. It sounds like Poco are on their way back to the glory days of F1, but if you think this smartphone is a Poco exclusive, that wouldn't be entirely correct because both Poco and Redmi belong to Xiaomi, and this has been released a few months ago in China with the name Redmi K60. But this wouldn't steal any of the show and the glory of the Poco F5 Pro, the global release. There are a whole lot of things to discuss here. As a starter, the main advantage of Poco F5 is indeed the price, because at this budget, it's unprecedented value for 2023. It costs a little more than last year's release, and Poco seem to be well holding to their traditions of staying within the range of $200 to $500 with most of their product line, with one high-end device to rule them all. I feel that Google Pixel 7, the OnePlus 10 and 11 series, Galaxy S23 Plus, even Xiaomi 13 series might be endangered, because this phone can either beat or at least match most of last year's flagships. The unboxing shows zero change from the previous generation. In fact, if we go back to Poco F1, you wouldn't notice much of a difference, and maybe it's time for a change. So, a silicone case, some manuals, the Poco F5 Pro smartphone, satisfying. There's a pre-installed screen protector, by the way, a power adapter included. It is 67 watts and is exactly as much as the power adapter included with the almost twice more expensive Xiaomi 13 smartphone. The area around the cameras is particularly interesting. Two color options are available, black and white. Because of the curves, Poco F5 Pro feels surprisingly good and thin in the hand. Coming from the smaller Pixel 7 and Galaxy S23 devices, I didn't notice any unpleasant feeling due to the bigger size. So if you want to get a phone with large screen which doesn't feel too bulky with a case, this is as close as it gets. Power it on and you're gonna notice that the display is OLED, and Poco promise a lot of good things about it. Specifications are also fantastic. Snapdragon 8 Plus Generation 1, configurations boosting a whole lot of RAM and storage, a triple camera setup with the main camera backed by optical image stabilization, a large battery with turbocharging support, even 30-watt wireless charging is integrated, current versions of Bluetooth and other connectivity protocols, and dual SIM support. At launch, the device runs Android 13 with Xiaomi's signature MIUI 14 skin. All of these specs confirm the feeling that Poco F5 has a lot of the DNA of Poco F1 in this famous formula, delivering high-end premium features at a rather mid-range price, something like a flagship. Now, not gonna use it this time, but you know the phrase that everybody associates with OnePlus, and I believe this phone fits very well in the shoes of being really a fantastic mid-range costing flagship wannabe, if we can say so. It's powered by Snapdragon 8 Plus Generation 1, which is the best system on a chip that Qualcomm have delivered for smartphones of 2022. Slightly worse in terms of peak performance than this year's Snapdragon 8 Generation 2, but it's a fact that when Redmi K60 was released in China, Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 was not quite out yet. So, we have a pretty large battery inside, more than 5,000 mAh, and despite this fact, it feels rather slim, and on top you have wireless charging, which is quite unbelievable. I think we should talk more about its real-life performance, and let's start the discussion by inspecting the display. Poco F5 Pro is boasting a 6.67-inch AMOLED dot display with crazy high resolution, so I guess it's quite normal to be marked also as a gaming phone. I personally continue to not be convinced about these extra high resolutions. Yes, there are some notable differences, but only if you stare too much. Also, I've seen some not so positive comments about Redmi K60's colors and viewing angles, but my opinion is that this panel is quite decent. Not superb, but certainly tuned well enough to feel great when you scroll, read, or game. Of course, you can switch back to a lower resolution. This positively influences the battery consumption, and you can have a few color tuning options on top of that. Quite decent experience when you watch videos or review some of the photos captured. Speaking of photos, camera performance has never been a key strength of Poco devices, at least not until now, because we have a 64-megapixel main camera backed by optical image stabilization, a lot of improvements as compared to the previous generation, fairly large sensor, bright optics, and very important, the great processing of Snapdragon 8 Plus Generation 1. So, if you check some of the samples, they do look brilliant. This Poco device actually comes very close to the photo quality of traditionally great shooters. So even if we compare it to Galaxy S23 or Pixel 7, the F5 Pro stays strong and is not too far behind. In many ways, it is very near the quality of the mighty Xiaomi 13, and what I like the most is that most photos turn out to be great from the first attempt of capturing, which is exactly how a high-end camera should feel on a 2023 device. As far as hardware goes, we have 3 cameras, but I primarily use 2 of them. The main is a 64-megapixel camera with optical image stabilization, and there's the 8-megapixel ultra-wide camera. The macro thing, which they call a camera, and it's right here, is in my opinion practically useless because it's only 2-megapixel camera, and we all know that the main camera, when you digitally zoom, produces good enough close-ups. I'd be really curious to see the famous DxO Marks team parsing this phone through their testing, because I feel that this camera setup is overall a very capable one. By far the best we've seen on a Poco device ever. Perhaps mostly because of what this high-end system-on-a-chip can do these days, and it is to extract greater quality and apply better stabilization, like in 4K or even in 8K video resolution. Don't bother with the latter one, as the files are getting really too huge and it's not quite easy to parse through editing softwares. Speaking of the system on a chip, it keeps its cool most of the time. It's gonna be very difficult to put it in a throttling condition, and this is a very positive thing, of course. It means that you can count on the full capacity of the CPU at almost every single point of time. This is our usual microphone test / outdoor vlogging test. Up to 1080p 60 frames per second. This is the maximum supported resolution by the Poco F5 Pro. Battery backup is also amazing. Capacity is slightly more than 5000 mAh, and with wired charging, it takes only 15 minutes to reach half of this capacity. It's the first time we see wireless charging on a Poco phone. In order to reach the maximum of 30 watts, you're gonna need a special charger though. On a regular 15-watt Qi charger, I have to wait until I reach 25% from the initial battery state. Concerning the rest of the hardware goodies, we find the iconic infrared blaster. Storage is also with solid performance, but is a step behind 2023's best. RAM specifications are also rather 2022-like. But we have some really nice surprises. You see this? In-display fingerprint scanner, and it works great, no hiccups, and is active all the time. Poco quite nailed it with this one. Shall we now talk about the software? Apparently MIUI based, Android 13, and this edition is very close to what Xiaomi are rolling on their premium Xiaomi 13 series. That's the regular Xiaomi 13, that's the Poco F5 Pro. There are some key differences though. A launcher with less customizations, but I actually like this one better than the MIUI launcher. There's a substantial amount of something that we're used to call bloatware, apps that you may not want or need, but Poco include them pre-installed because they probably get some benefits from that. Luckily, you can easily get rid of most of them, and there also are some tools to help you with debloating the entire OS. That's gonna free up some storage and RAM and might slightly extend the battery life. Other than that, MIUI is alright. It has its weird things, but it's highly customizable, has plenty of excellent ideas, well implemented, and of course, some areas that you might find annoying as well. For sure, both Xiaomi and Poco try hard to improve it and to take care of supporting and upgrading it in the long run. It's expected F5 Pro to receive software updates for at least another 3 years. Now, after all the praising, should we talk about the drawbacks? Maybe it's the speakers? Nah, not really. The speakers sound great, and for the record, we have both Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision present. Maybe if you are concerned about the performance, you shouldn't be, because on the sustained loads, this processor keeps it cool all the time. Flaws are rather minor. No eSIM support, no proper waterproof rating, and maybe the fact that it's Gorilla Glass 5 covering the display. Poco could have gone for a slightly newer revision. In the end, if you want to buy a smartphone with flagship-grade performance at a price which is rather mid-range, then I think this is one of the best choices that we have right now in 2023, and my gut tells me that it's gonna be really popular throughout the rest of this year. And in many ways, when we compare it to the much more expensive Xiaomi 13, it's either slightly worse or on par, or in some ways even better than its bigger, more premium brother, and costs about half of the price, which makes it really fantastic value smartphone. Well, that's been everything about Poco F5 Pro. And it's interesting to hear from you. Do you really like what Poco have done with this body? Do you like the idea of rebranding inside and outside China? And in case you have any questions, it would be great to see them in the comment section below the video, where you can also read what the others have to say about this smartphone. And that's all about the episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the idea of inspecting cool tech together with me, then subscribe. The next video is dropping in just a few days. Now, nothing else left than wishing you a fantastic day. Stay safe. See you around. Bye.